And welcome to worship of the Universalist Unitarian Church of Peoria. I'm not on the mic. I'm Amy Popp, and I serve this congregation as its credentialed lifespan religious educator. We welcome you all to our service this morning. The Unitarian Universalist Church is a place where we come to learn more about being human. We're not here because we've figured out all of life's questions or because we think we've got it right. We've come here to learn about being in relationship with each other and with all of the earth's inhabitants. Today's service will open us up to new cultural perspectives and ideas. As we open our minds to those new viewpoints, may we also remember to honor the people of the Peoria Nation, who were inhabitants of this land long ago and experienced our world through an entirely different lens. We have a special guest from the Philippines, up late with a 13-hour difference. She is Reverend Tet Gallardo, former ballet scholar from Star King from 2016 to 17. The Ballet Scholarship is a one-year visiting scholar program, formerly qualifying only Transylvanian ordained ministers. During her time in Berkeley, she spoke at 17 congregations in the East and West Coast and introduced her Spice Communion at an international gathering in the General Assembly at 2017. She has served as an officer at the International Council of Unitarians and Universalists for 4 years. She also serves the UU's Reckoning History Group that has just launched this month to an international audience of over 100 in a live webinar. Reverend Tet has spoken in virtual services in the UK, Canada, Australia, Tokyo, and Singapore too. Today happens to be her 8th virtual service in the US in the past year. I believe Reverend Tet should be with us live, and I invite her to offer a greeting to the congregation if we can get her on the stream.
All right, so can everyone hear me? Hello, everyone. I'm here in my beach house in one of 7,641 islands in the Philippines. I'm happy to be with you tonight. Thank you, Amy, for that wonderful introduction. I'd like to give special thanks to Reverend Jennifer Innes, for inviting me here, finding me. Today, we will be with Amy Popp, Austin Locke, and Cullen Baker, who are bravely doing a first in mixed online and on-site service. Thanks for finding some of the Filipino songs we needed today. Holding you all in my heart at this difficult juncture in America. 1 in 5 Filipino families have relatives in the United States, and so you are closer to home than most can imagine. We count on your moral imagination to keep siding with love. We are with you.
Today, I invite you to help us get to know you. Please join us for our fellowship hour after the service in our fellowship hall. This congregation continues to be sustained by the care, talents, and generous gifts of our members and friends. If you'd like to make a financial gift, you are invited to drop a donation in the offering plate at the back of the sanctuary or contribute online at our website. Now let us enter into worship, willing to be genuine with each other, honest within ourselves, and open to the myriad perspectives in life. Rise, and I invite you to rise as the music begins, and enjoy.
And when I rise Good morning. From Jose Rizal. I believe in revelation, but not in the revelation which each religion claims to possess, but in the living revelation which surrounds us on every side. Mighty, eternal, unceasing, incorruptive, clear and distinct, universal as is the being from whom it proceeds, in that revelation which speaks to us and penetrates us from the moment we are born until we die.
Our chalice lighting today is entitled Taking Down a Trellis by Dufu, and Beckett Laughlin is going to help us light our chalice at the end. The sticks I tied already wither and die. The pumpkin leaves are getting sparse and thin. It's lucky that the white flowers fully grew. You have to help the green vines fade away. There's no end to the sound of insects in autumn. Whatever's in the minds of the sparrows at dusk. Now the world is one of cold and waste, but human life has its beginning too. We light this chalice in honor of all of the sources of human experience.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are. Come, come, whoever you are. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, caravan of despair. Come, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Our story today is by Reverend Tet and will be told by her. It is called No Mud, No Lotus.
No lotus, no mud, no lotus, no mud, no lotus. No lotus, no mud, no lotus, no mud, no lotus.
Do you know the story of why people pray like this and sometimes like this? Well, according to legend, it's because we don't want to forget the lotus flowers. So the story goes that in ancient times, people were so connected to nature and God that then people didn't know need. So they didn't know how to ask or to even pray. God provided everything, and the people took care of the provisions in their custody. God said, I put in your presence a symbol of my everlasting love, the lotus flower. It grows on mud to help you remember what good is there in the dirt. By putting our palms together, we remember. But after many generations, people began to take these for granted. They slowly forgot how blessed they were. Soon they forgot to be thankful. Then they forgot the work of keeping the blessings. Then the blessings soon rotted Then friendship soon rotted, and their minds grew weary with gloom. The story of the rotting planet reached ears of Maya and Sita, and they feared for their last lotus. They suddenly knew the fear of losing something that which might never return. Sita soon grew sick from her own despair, but before she ascended, she told Maya, "Do not forget the time of plenty, the time of no need, and ask for its return. Put your palms together to remember the lotus, and I will be with you." Maya kept to her word and began to put her palms together every day in the morning and evening to remember, to remember, to remember how it was to feel a lotus between her palms, meditating on life and the season of abundance, to remember a time that people still know how to receive grace with humility and care for it. The vines had begun to grow around the pond. Maya had hoped they were the return of the lotuses, but no. Her friends had stopped visiting. They were nowhere to be found. Maya kept to her promise. Palms together, day and night, day and night. But as it took so much time, putting her palms together had slowly become a mindless habit, forgetting the desire for life. She had forgotten about the lotuses as she is also forgetting Sita. One day, there was a bud in the pond, but her mind's eye has been blinded by her faithlessness. Then Sita appeared to her in her dream. "Maya, Maya, why do you put your palms together when you pray? Why, Maya, why? Have faith." She awoke from her dream. She ran to the village and asked, "Who among you can remember the lotuses?" No one answered. So she put her palms together once more to feel Sita with the power of the memory of her ancestors and the power of the imagination of future generations. A full-bloomed lotus flower appeared in her mind's eye, and then she remembered. She opened her eyes and suddenly recognized the bud, even if it had no resemblance to the lotus she was hoping for. And soon, lotus flowers bloomed once more, and lotus flowers bloomed and died, as flowers do. But so long as there was mud, they could grow. No mud, no lotus. Even now, Maya doesn't forget to meditate on what is here and not forgotten, to remember what isn't missing, to be mindful, to care for the buds, no matter how small, to nurture what is given, no matter how long it will take for them to bloom, and to care that the world is ready for them.
Glasses with hands on our hearts and humming along. Our hymn at this time is Oras Na by Carintha. It is a video that has Tagalog lyrics and English subtitles. Enjoy. As Unitarian Maria Mitchell reminds us, and yet, small as is our whole system compared with the infinitude of creation, brief as is our life compared with the cycles of time, we are so tethered to all by the beautiful dependencies of life that not only the sparrow's fall is felt to the outermost bound, but the vibrations set in motion by the words we utter reach through all space, and tremor of it is felt through time. Knowing that we're part of those dependencies and vibrations, we dedicate this moment to sharing joys, sorrows, names, and milestones in our congregation. Our first joy. We send a belated happy birthday wish to Elle Cordonaway, who celebrated her golden 9th birthday on November 30th with friends and family who came from near and far for her special day. We also send our congratulations to Terry and Tom Malone as they celebrate the birth of their new grandson, Theo Forrest, born on November 12th, to their daughter Katie and her husband Matt Wehrman. Eden and Luca are the happy sibs. Now we turn to sorrows. We share the sad news that longtime member Theo Jean Kenyon died on Friday afternoon at Apostolic Christian Skyline. Theo and her late husband Les were committed members for decades. Les designed the building we now enjoy. Theo was a journalist and a great presence within this congregation. A memorial for her will be announced as soon as possible. Lastly, we offer our caring and support to the Amy and Scott Cordonaway family and other friends and family of 7-year-old Brecken from Plainville, Illinois, who lost his 11-month battle with rare brain tumor. Amy tells us Brecken was a shining light who brought humor, determination, and love to his family. Brecken leaves behind his parents, a twin sister, and a big sister to mourn his loss. And in our larger world, in light of the verdict in Kyle Rittenhouse's trial, where there was no justice for the people killed and injured after being shot by him, we offer this reflection from Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. Unitarian Universalists are a part of a lineage of people who choose love and choose each other. We're blessed with a theology that teaches us that every life is precious and loved, and that we belong to each other. In the midst of policies, structures, and ideologies that protect and reinforce hatred and dominance, we choose love, and we choose each other. And we don't let up in pushing for the spiritual and moral reimagination and renewal of our system. May you be held in community and by those you love. May we tend to our grief and rage. May we pray for the community of Kenosha and for the families and loved ones of Anthony Huber and Joseph Rosenbaum and Gage Grosskreutz. Let us hold all that is in our hearts for one more moment while I light the candles and we share the quiet. Amen. Our spoken meditation today is on the difficulty of discerning shapes in the distance by Luisa Igloria. Little oases of language, assurances to console the living. How the shell of the once familiar body, dissolved in rain into the sod, is yet alive somewhere. Above the scrim of trees, beyond our frugal line of sight, it goes on living, the minister says, just as we go on living. As we rise with first light, impelled by the thin pencil stroke of salt in the air, herbal and almost sweet, making importunate demands. What's dark, if not the catalyst of desire? Or is this merely my particular failing, to beg intention from such fleeting randomness? The overexposed and seductive. Purchase. Old-fashioned word meaning to tether and bind at cost. Where in biblical text is the camel that will not pass through the eye of the needle, but instead turns round and round, wanting a glimpse of orange linen threaded through its halter? Someone knocks at a gate and is led into a courtyard. Little children come out to slide in cardboard boxes down the cobbled lane. What have I held in my arms and loved? Above the fenced-in houses, light that strikes the first or last chords, trembling the leaves. Only let me keep what I may. Once in the night, like a weather vane, I turned to the sound of another, warm breath in my ear mouthing a name, a rivulet folded back in water.
Saksi ning kabulakan, saksi ning kalanggaman, ubus ni adtung dakong kahoy, dito na tao, imong kaluoy, unyad ning tabon ang kangit, kay gidaguman manang langit, unya kalit mihilak ka, ambot ngano na unsa ba, natahap ka sa atong gugma. Tuhi ko akong pinili, nautlan kaning kinabuhi, kay dituon niya sa langit, imong katawa, akong kasakit. Hagsuga sa kapalangan, napalong hangtod sa luganan, ibabaw sa akong lubong, ayaw kalimot magtalong, aron duna kay mahandom. Tuhi ko akong pinili, nautlan kaning kinabuhi, kay dituon niya sa langit, imong katawa, akong kasakit. Ang suga sa kapalangan, napalong hangtod sa lubnganan, ibabaw sa akong lubong, ayaw kalimot magtanong, aron duna kay mahandong. Akong pinili, nautlan kaning ginabuhi kay didtuon niya sa langit imong katawa akong kasakit ang suga sa kapalaran napalong hangtod sa luganan ibabaw sa akong lubong ayaw kalimot pagtanong aron duna kay mahandong
We are honored to welcome our guest minister, Reverend Tet Gallardo. She comes to us from the Philippines, where she's president and executive minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church there. Her topic concerns adding culture to our named sources in Unitarian Universalism, following on Reverend Jennifer's history of our principles and sources from last Sunday. Thank you, Reverend Tet, for staying up so late to be with us.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. It just started to rain, so maybe you'll hear it. Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. All right, so the Philippines is a country so Catholic. We are one of only 2 states in the world that do not have divorce. The other is Vatican City. Here, just a few years back, a man was imprisoned for offending religious feelings. And of course, he was a friend to the UUs. Back in 2006 in Manila, I was co-leading a small UU Chalice circle with around 10 to 15. Although it would seem too small, UUs from other countries would come attend once in a while. We would have UU leaders and ministers from US, Canada, the UK, Europe, Australia. In those times, co-leaders Bob and I would get so excited as it would feel to us truly more churchy than a book club or a garage band. During their visits, we had at least once said giddily, "Intelligent life form has landed." It felt to me like we were this young, struggling religion that would feel affirmed by their presence, until I went deeper inward into my own culture. I had long resonated with the sensibilities of Thoreau, Whitman, and Emerson. I had long followed them as wise teachers of a culture I thought I was part of. An American might boast it only took half a generation for the Philippines to be Americanized. But that's less because of American power and more because of Filipinos' cultural savvy. Filipinos easily learn cultures wherever we find friends and family. Our nation is many nations, heavily intermingling among the 100 or so ethnic groups, traveling to make new friends and new families. Because learning is faster when knowledge is embedded in relationship, Filipinos' penchant for friendship helps us harvest the power of cultural difference. And conversely, almost anywhere in the world, when I say I'm a Filipino, there is more often this welcome accorded to us. Even if the Americans had granted us national independence 3 generations ago, I still grew up feeling and seeing myself as a brown American, like people from Guam or Puerto Rico. 4 generations ago, during World War II, Filipinos drove away the Japanese from Philippine soil and supported their American colonizers to prevent the Japanese from advancing to the rest of the Pacific, therefore saving Australia and New Zealand. This was when we were still part of the American Commonwealth. Back then, it was as if Filipinos were fighting for American territory, so they demanded American rewards. So the Filipino veterans were given American citizenship. One such veteran was Enrique Jurado, an Air Force pilot. Because of him, his son Gene became an American citizen. And before Gene passed away 2 years ago, he was a member of the First Universalist Church of Denver. And that church is a partner to my home congregation. Gene came from a line of educated Filipinos, and one of his ancestors was a woman named Paz Marquez Benitez, a well-known author of, in 1925, a short story she wrote gave birth to modern Philippine writing in English. In 1925, it's the first generation of Filipinos experiencing American occupation, and already we had become luminaries of your language. And now, we are the fourth largest English-speaking country in the world. Unbelievable. So when people ask me, why do you speak English so well? I can only roll my eyes. Filipino women authors had a very special reason for liking English. Because unlike the Spanish colonization before that, women and men were given the same opportunities. In short, it was less Catholic. I began to discover this literary star, Paz Marquez Benitez, and found one of her works called Night in the Hills, in which she wrote, I suspect, are her real beliefs about God. Now remember, this is a heavily Catholic country to this day, with 90% of the country believing in the bread as the literal body of Christ. So the author had to be extra careful. She wrote about this character, a man who, in a scene where he should be musing about his lover, instead, out of the blue, muses about God from thin air, which adds nothing to the plot. And to me, these are the author's beliefs. She wrote, God for him was always up in the sky. Only the God he thought of now was not the God he had always known. This God he was thinking of was another God. He was wondering if, when man died and moved on to another life, he would not find there the things he missed and so wished to have. He had a deep certainty that that would be so, that after his mortal life was over, and we came against that obstruction called death, our lives, like a stream that runs up against the dam, would still flow on in courses fuller and smoother. This must be so. He had a feeling, almost an instinct, that he was not wrong, and a being all wise and compassionate would enable us to remedy our frustrations and heartaches. Sounds universalist to me. Anyway, a decade before this was written, a certain American author named Frank R. Blake had written a book titled Philippine Literature, in which he wrote this. All these tribes with these languages have produced little or nothing which can claim to be literature in the sense of elegant and artistic writing. This American's book was written in 1911, and a decade further back before Blake even knew of the Philippines. Our national hero, Jose Rizal, was executed by the Spanish for writing 2 novels. When we trace Rizal's sensibilities, we can see authors in his cultural ancestry espousing liberal religion, and we can also discover warriors that include women generals, heretics, and apostates who led bloody religious rebellions that were not hoping to convert others, but to defend just their freedom to practice their own faith. You see, these 7,600 islands had many faiths, but no religious wars before the Catholics came. This very old humane civilization, inhabited as early as 700,000 years ago, has persisted in our culture of care and acceptance that other nations count on Filipino workers. When the Americans started occupying the Philippines, President Roosevelt appointed a Unitarian to be the civil governor of the Philippines. His name was William Howard Taft. Taft would later become the president of the American Unitarian Association and even the president of the United States. But before he even got here, Unitarians were already here, numbering more than 1 million Filipinos, far more in number than all Unitarians in the world combined at the time. They called themselves the Philippine Independent Church, and they were kind of the Anglicans of the Filipinos, and they had independently and organically come into their own Unitarian theology as a homegrown response against Catholicism. Our culture was already that liberal, and much of Philippine literature attests to that. Although well-known Philippine literature may be in Spanish and English, they are still rife with Filipino sensibilities and culture. Tales, epics, legends in the languages of over 100 ethnic groups who call this country home have persisted from before they could be written. They were orally transmitted through time. They include popular proverbs, riddles, and lullabies, and they are fascinating to study. For instance, in the Mangyan ethnic group, there is no word for war. In the Bontoc region, it has been observed that no rape has ever been spoken of. And until now, a lot of artists go there for a sort of personal healing pilgrimage, just immersing among the people, their culture, their language, customs, art, and cuisine. In the Tagalog region, you will know of ways of feeling that have no translation in English. The word tampo, for instance, means I am nursing a hurt you caused, but not as a victim, but as a sibling waiting to be reconciled. Here's another great author during the brief American occupation, a woman named Trinidad Tarosa Subido. From her poem titled Muted Cry, she wrote, "They took away the language of my blood, giving me one more widely understood. More widely understood? Now lips can never with the soul in me commune. Moments there are I strain, but futile ever, to flute my feelings through some native tune. Alas, how can I interpret my mood? They took away the language of my blood." The Americans granted Philippine independence in July 4, 1946, after World War II. But the colonization continues unabated through cultural domination, especially in the capital, Manila, where they have stronger ties to American financial markets and the American economy. I look at culture as rightfully belonging to sources of living tradition. In the beginning of the service, I think before this service, Reverend Jennifer Innes already spoke about the sources and the principles. And you know, our 6 sources doesn't mention cultures as living tradition. Cultures are tentative tapestries that help us design our communities. They are the language of revelation unfolding within our existing communities and embed in our relationships. Culture deserves to be recognized as a source of human understanding that bridge us to the mysteries. Cultures provide us ways of coping with problems by posing alternatives to our ways of seeing and being. Also, it is by making cultures accountable, the way we view other sources mentioned, making the Bible accountable, making humanist teachings accountable, and so on, gives us a sensitivity to our true influences. I remember how free I felt upon knowing what my personal theology actually is. It's the same liberation I felt realizing what our culture is. When we take our personal theology for granted, we can get hijacked by dogma. If we take our culture for granted, we can get hijacked by dominant culture, by consumerism, by corporate culture. We Filipinos come from peoples of many nations who call this place home, and those that we bring into our homes as well. For every 2 Filipino households, there is at least 1 Filipino working abroad as nurses, teachers, seafarers, doctors, peacekeepers, engineers, and others. They work in more than 100 countries all over the world. They are more likely to devote their finances to saving their families here. Think about how that enriches our culture and helps keep us open-hearted such that we have an open door policy. And sometimes I call it the open sea spirituality. For refugees, since ancient times, we have welcomed them. The UN Refugee Agency cited the Philippines as one of the model countries for seeking refuge. We can look to other cultures to see them as communities of practice that we can learn from and help us recognize our own. In our times of uncertainty, when many are hesitant to lead, we sometimes need untested modes of leadership. We can hold our sentiments in different spaces in our minds, bodies, or among our community as modeled by many other cultures. When we look at our 6 sources, we can see how these are imperfect, faulty, and problematic sources all. Yet it is in continuing to converse or engage with them that we become more faithful to our personal journeys. Culture is a lived religion and a living tradition. Cultures are not just practices, they are communities of practice that form part of our personal identities. We may be invited to participate temporarily into certain practices to open our hearts and minds, but only as transients. To be fully invested in a culture, your survival and the culture's must be mutually dependent. Thus, we must approach a culture as a holy ground of being in which humans have depended on for survival. Thank you.
Carolyn McDade from All Souls Unitarian Church. I invite you to rise and hum along. We're trying a new thing as we listen to this traditional hymn that we're well familiar with. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the flame of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now our benediction by Reverend Tet.
May we step into communities with respect and wonder. May we wander often and welcome often. Amen.